Hello, I'm Professor Sharon Ruston at the English Literature and Creative Writing Department at Lancaster University, and today I will talk about what to look for when reading romantic women's poetry. And I'm going to focus on one poet particularly, Charlotte Smith, who lived between 1749 to 1806, and she writes lyric poetry, a form that is particularly associated with the Romantic period. The Romantic period is usually thought to run from the late 18th to the early 19th century, and included such authors as William Blake, William Wordsworth, Samuel Taylor Coleridge, John Keats, and the Shelleys. Charlotte Smith's poems also, though, belong to the literary movement of sensibility, which privileged feeling over reason. Contemporaries of Smith thought that women wrote a different kind of poetry to men, that there were different topics, different poetic forms used, that it specifically concerned things that women, rather than men, were worried about. So, when you read women's poetry of the Romantic period, see whether you find this to be true. Smith's first collection of poems, called Elegiac Sonnets, was published in 1784 at her own expense in an attempt to raise money. She was trying to maintain her family's reputation and social standing while awaiting the outcome, which did not come within her lifetime, of a chancery court case that would restore her to the status and wealth of a gentlewoman. Her husband was profligate with money, and Smith had written elegiac sonnets in a debtor's prison with him and many of the 12 children that she had by him. In the elegiac sonnets, Smith presents herself autobiographically as a solitary, world-weary, mournful and melancholy poet figure. And I'm now going to look in detail at one sonnet in the collection, which is called On Being Cautioned Against Walking on a Headland Overlooking the Sea Because It Was Frequented by a Lunatic. It's a very long title. This sonnet is a good example of the collection and of Smith's technique. The narrator imagines the plight of a solitary, poor wretch who she just calls the lunatic, and who has been seen by others walking along the cliff where she is walking now. I'm going to read the poem now, and while I'm reading it, you could be looking out for anything that you feel particularly pertains to Smith as a woman. Does this poem tell us anything about what it was like to be a woman at this time? So here's the poem. Is there a solitary wretch who hies to the tall cliff with starting pace or slow, and measuring, views with wild and hollow eyes its distance from the waves that chide below? Who, as the sea-born gale with frequent sighs chills his cold bed on the mountain turf, with hoarse, half-uttered lamentation, lies murmuring responses to the dashing surf. In moody sadness on the giddy brink, I see him more with envy than with fear. He has no nice felicities that shrink from giant horrors, wildly wandering here. He seems, uncursed with reason, not to know the depth or the duration of his woe. Smith imagines the lunatic measuring the distance between the cliff and sea below, suggesting perhaps that he is considering jumping off and ending it all. She not only sympathises with him, but she envies him. His lack of reason, his madness, means that he is not aware of the depth or the duration of his woe. There is a paradox here. Can he both be so unhappy that he wishes to commit suicide, but also unaware of how awful his life is? Have you noticed that she does not at any point see the actual lunatic? It's possible that she's actually describing her own feelings as though they were his. Perhaps her sympathy with his state of mind is actually a projection of her own unhappiness. The question with which she begins her poem, is there a solitary wretch who hies, is answered with a yes, but she is the wretch in question, wandering upon a headland rebelliously, even though she has been cautioned against it. So I think her particular situation as a woman is alluded to here, in the fact that she has been warned not to walk in particular areas, and in the imagery she uses. The waves chide or tell her off while she laments her femininity. She wishes she did not have the nice felicities that shrink from giant horrors. And the phrase nice felicities, which is italicized, means appropriate and pleasing behaviour. Perhaps Smith means that as a woman she's expected to act in a particular way. Watch out for changes in tone in the poem. I think that Smith is being sarcastic in this line. The italics suggest that the lunatic has more freedom than she does, perhaps because he has no regard for proper behaviour, and perhaps partly also because he is a man and so can act as he pleases. Perhaps these nice felicities, though, are all that stop her from being brave enough to throw herself off the giddy brink on which she stands. Smith's collection, Elegiac Sonnets, ran into 9 editions and greatly influenced the sonnets of Wordsworth, Coleridge and Keats. Smith did not offend anyone by writing these poems. They were sentimental and full of womanly feeling. But I would argue that she still manages to allude to the restrictions placed upon women within these parameters. Thank you.